Hello, my name is Christopher F. Coleman with the Business Intelligence Group. I'm a business leader, advisor, and business coach. I help entrepreneurs, business leaders, and hustlers out there with their business problems. And in this video, I wanted to talk about business analytics versus analysis. So we have business analysis versus analytics. And so analysis is a very simple concept of looking at raw data to see what happened already, what happened in the past. Analytics, you have to do some advanced calculation to identify insights to make business decisions based off of these calculations and uncertainty. And so it's a lot of probability and statistics. So again, we have analysis. It's all about the past. So for example, I watched the game last night between, in the WNBA games, it was the Wings versus Atlanta Dream. And so Atlanta Dream won. And you could say, the Wings lost because of ... because of rebounds. The Dream won because of rebounds or points in the paint. You could say Enrique Ogumawale scored 28 points. And so this is something that you can point to that lets you know what happened. Atlanta, they dominated in rebounds. And this is an analysis. You're looking at the data and coming up with a conclusion. It's already passed. When we look at analytics, it's all about the future. It's about predicting the future analytically with numbers and not just arithmetic and adding, subtracting, and dividing. We're talking about statistics. We're talking about probability. We're talking about uncertainty. And so what patterns consistently drive the outcomes? So we're looking at all of these independent variables that lend to winning, or that lends to profits in terms of a business. So one such model that you can utilize in statistics is a regression model. And so within regression models, this is in which variables have measurable predictive relationships. And so you might look at many different examples of variables such as turnovers, rebounds, 3-point percentage, free throw percentage, assists, pace of the game, rest days, home versus away, star player usage. There's so many different variables that go into winning and or losing. And same thing with your business. There are many different variables that lends to whatever business problem you're trying to solve. So that makes me go to my next point, which is about the business problem. And statistics, you always want to come up with a business problem and a hypothesis. And so here we want to say which statistical variables appear most connected to the Atlanta Dream starting the season 2-0. That might be just an example. There's so many different ways that you can word that, different ways that of different business problems that you want to tackle. But in this case, I'm just trying to get an abstract idea in a concrete way. In basketball, sports is a great way. And so a dependent variable, meaning that it depends on other variables, are, for example, point differential. In terms of, Atlanta scored this amount of points and they won, and the Dallas Wings scored this amount of points and they lost. What is the difference in between that? Total points scored, wins. These are all dependent variables, or what we call the Y variable. And so next, I would look at, in this example, in analytics trying to build the model, I think point differential is probably the best. And so they won by 3 points. The other day when they played the Dream, when they played against the Minnesota Lynx, they won by 1 point. And so you can look at, point differentials in the game to identify as a Y variable. Now, in terms of X coefficients or X variables, you have field goal percentage that you can use, 3-point percentage, assists, turnovers, and rebounds. These are all stats and data points in which you can collect to begin to put in your model. And so this is the formula: Y equals beta naught plus beta 1, which is the field goal percentage. I got 40.1%, plus beta 2, which is the 3-point percentage, beta 3, beta 4, so on and so on. And then you have this error. This is basically all of the variables that is not accounted in these variables here. And then you have a result of an R squared. R squared basically gives you a percentage, let's say 95%, right? If so, let's say you do this, you need software to do these calculations. It's the best way. But let's say the R squared is 95%. And what's it's saying that 95% of the variables are accounted for in this model. That's all it's saying. So that means 5% is in this error here. And so that could be a lot of different things that you can't quantify, like tiredness or motivation. You can't calculate some of those things. And so you have to utilize this error message or this error symbol to identify whatever you can't capture in the model. And this is just for an example. Now, the next big thing is that it's only been 2 games. And this is what makes analytics and analysis so much differently. They're so different in that analysis, it is you have the data, you can do addition, subtraction, multiplication, you can divide, and you can find out information about what happened. With analytics, you really have to think and have an understanding of the data, of the business or the sport or whatever you're doing. You really have to have an intimate knowledge so that you can apply the numbers the correct way. And so with 2 games, it's only been 2 observations. And so that's not enough data to put in the model to get a reasonable or an accurate result. And so we can't use the data for just 2 games. There's only been 2 games in the season with Atlanta Dream. And so what can we do? Well, we can look at the WNBA as a whole. And so one thing that we have to look at is that when you don't have enough data, maybe you have to wait to get more data, or you can compare a lot of other results, change your business question, change the parameters of what you're trying to find out, so you can have more observations, so you can have more data points, so you can run some of these models. And so next thing, in terms of business and basketball or sports, it's adversarial. And so this is where we get into business strategy, or a basketball strategy, whatever the case might be. It's because a plan versus strategy, maybe I might make a video. A plan is say, hey, I'm gonna do steps 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and it will yield these results. And you can do that. Let's say if you are cleaning up the house, you could say, hey, I'm going to pick up the trash. I'm going to sort the clothes. I'm going to straighten my desk. I'm going to do all of these different things. And when you're done, it's complete. But you can't do that in an adversarial environment, in an environment where somebody's trying to stop you. In basketball, you have an opponent. In sports, you have an opponent. In business, you have competition. You have there's other forces at play, whether it's laws and government that's in a way, substitutions, suppliers, competition. All of these factors prevent you from conducting what you want to do. And so it's very adversarial. And so since you're in an adversarial environment, you just can't use just raw numbers. You just can't use rebounds and points. And so you have to think, what can I use? Well, let's look at the margins. Let's look at the margins from game 1 versus game 2, right? What are those margins? How much did we win by? Points in the paint. Game 1, we had 50 points in the paint. Game 2, we had 25 points in the paint. So that's a margin of 25. And so you can look at those margins because it is all relative. All the teams are different. They have different play styles. They play on different days. There's so many different things that can be pressed upon the game or the environment, impressed upon on the game or environment, which can give you different outcomes. And so if the Lynx and the Atlanta Dream play again, it's not going to be the same stats. And so that is exactly what I mean. And so maybe we look at the margins to identify what variables are the best. Now, as I talked about earlier, the first thing we want to do in building our model is gather data from the league wide. And so instead of just focusing on one team and their schedule, meaning they only had 2 games thus far, you want to look at the NBA, the WNBA as a whole, all of the teams, all of the games played, to identify what are the variables that lead to winning across the WNBA. And so you'll look at an average points in the paint from all of the teams. Okay, how many rebounds in terms of margins between all of the teams. And so when you have gathered all of the league-wide data, next you want to calculate the margins. Then you want to build your regression model. And this is again where you can use ChatGPT, you can use R, you can do a lot of different other software to do this regression model in Excel, whatever the case might be. And another thing I want to add here in terms of gathering the data, as a business leader, the implied task is to set up an environment where you can collect the data. And so it's easier said than done, but you should take steps in finding ways to get data, whether you're scanning, whether it is manual, you're taking manual data points. There's so many different ways to do it, but that is an implied task. Now, moving on to 4. Now you have to evaluate your coefficients, your p-value, and an adjusted R-squared. Now, I'm not going to talk about these today because it's more complex and it's out of the scope of what we want to talk about. But these are very important to understand in statistics and in terms of modeling to find accurate models to figure out what are the best variables that lead to winning or business success. But essentially, for example, adjusted R-squared basically tells you how many variables are taken into account in this model. And coefficients simply are just the independent variables, the X factors. And so you want to identify what are the best ones. Is, substitutions, how many times you substitute in a quarter. You have to identify what makes sense. There's so many different variables, you can't use all of them. So you have to figure out in your context, in your situation, what are the best variables to use to get and yield the results that you're looking for. Now, the 5th step is you want to identify the strongest predictors. Once you do this modeling, you might come up with maybe 10 different variables that lead to winning or to your business success, and you can rank those based off of that adjusted R-squared, right? And so maybe in this case, you identify that second chance points is a key statistic in predicting winning, meaning if you were to conduct a regression model, the results that you would get would be for every second chance opportunities I get in terms of +1 margin, I will score plus 0.25 points in a game. And so then the idea is to find ways to get second chance points. But the implied task of that is offensive rebounding. So then you say, well, how do I get more offensive rebounds? Well, then that goes back to strategy in terms of your personnel, in terms of how you run your plays. And so all of these concepts build upon another. Now, after you identify the strongest predictors, you want to compare your team's business profile against league patterns, and for as a business organization, you want to compare it to the industry and competitors to see how the competitors measure up to what you are doing. Now, the last thing is you want to make the appropriate decision. And that is the key to analytics. When it's all said and done, you do all this complex work. Once you set it up, you can fly through it. But once you get those results, now it's up to you to make a decision. Again, my name is Christopher F. Coleman with the Business Intelligence Group. Today we talked about analysis versus analytics. Analysis is in the past, data points that already happened. Analytics is something that you have to do algorithms, you have to do statistics, and it's around uncertainty to predict what variables help you to win in sports or in business or whatever the business problem is. Again, my name is Christopher F. Coleman. I'll catch you in the next one. Peace.